Hi. So this week, obviously, completely different person. My fat baby face is showing as I'm partaking in No Shave November, and I haven't had my face this silky smooth since sophomore year when I last really partook in No Shave November, and I have to say, miss my beard a lot. But what I want to talk about for this week is just a continuation of what I said in one of the prior episodes, mentioning how EA is just gutting properties. And for this week, I'm going to talk about Star Wars and how Disney has just completely sold out in terms of what they produce with their Star Wars products in both film, television, and also in video games. And starting with EA, I've complained about them before. You know I have. And with EA taking a lot of loved features out of a number of other game series that they have and giving out what feel like half-finished products, giving them the Star Wars title definitely feeds into the whole ideal of Disney that they're the big corporate titan that is selling out classic titles, making live-action films off of their classic films that don't need live-action films, solely because it's going to make money. Hand over fist, they're going to rake in money. And the unfortunate aspect of that, besides the obvious dearth in originality, is also we as the audience are not getting good products. We're just getting a rehashing. And when it feels like when they do go for the original route, such as this sequel trilogy of Star Wars films and some of the other Star Wars films that are interspersed in here of Rogue One, Han Solo, or the Solo story, they aren't good. They feel like they got the marketing team together for Disney corporate and they sat them all down and they got focus groups and they said, okay, now if we were to add these new characters, which one would you want to see? Which one do you think you would want to buy an action figure for? Which one would you want to see in a video game? That's what it feels like they did. They didn't want to further the story in any meaningful way or create anything that has a lasting impression on society as a whole, or really just captures the imaginations of youth today, so like the prequel trilogies and the original trilogies did back in those decades. No, they want to put something out there that is going to introduce characters where kids are like, ooh, can we buy the toy of that? Like the little Flappy Bird thing they had in the second of the sequel series films that Chewbacca was eating at the fire. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's inconsequential. It looks like a puffin, but it's a space puffin, essentially. And who cares about that? Who cares about all of these superfluous characters that you add in if you don't give any background to them or any reason of why we should care about them? You know, you can criticize the prequel films all you want for sloppy execution, poor dialogue, some effects that weren't great, and focusing on characters that we didn't like. Phantom Menace, Jar Jar Binks, right there. But regardless of that, and those flaws of the prequel trilogy of the early 2000s, they were still able to endear themselves to us as Star Wars fans, both old and new, because it had parts of it that really made sense. It had characters introduced in it that were really cool. General Grievous, Count Dooku, so on and so forth. And we were able to get behind and say, I want to see what happens with them. I want to see, what they do with this scene or with this character. And again, the dialogue and the script written by George Lucas for each of the films, not the best. Not the best. He didn't do great with that. But the characters and plot lines themselves were interesting enough to not only engage, but again, endear the films to the fans and to people who hadn't yet seen Star Wars films. But you go over to the new Disney films, and there isn't that aspect. It just feels like everything is kind of introduced haphazardly because that idea would make sense from a corporate level. That idea would make sense from a marketing level. That idea would make sense from a, what we think the audiences want to see or what the test audiences say kind of thing, instead of basing itself off of the original content of the first two trilogies, which were very successful in and of themselves and generated a lot of fans based off of the lore. Because if you look at the comics and the television shows that were based off of those first two trilogies, it's astonishing. It's astounding. There's more original content based off of those first two trilogies from people not associated with the creation of those film trilogies than there are actually original curated content from the people who make the official films, which I think really says something about how dedicated the fan base is, which I definitely consider myself to be a part of. But you go to these Disney films, and there doesn't feel like any bit of originality or content that I care about or that other fans care about. It feels like they're going for fan service, but the fan service they provide is of an equal analogy would be someone who is of the disco era and they're coming into, say, 90s breakdancing. Okay? They know nothing about breakdancing, but they try to bring their skills and they're like, hey, you should incorporate this. It just probably isn't going to work, more than likely. That's what they're doing with Star Wars. They're going off of the, hey, I think you would like this. I'm not going to look at any of the original content. I'm going to base all the things off of my personal expertise, but I'm not going to look at the prior stuff. And I'm just going to kind of cobble together something that I think I would like, but I don't know if the audience would like off of test screenings and things like that. We're just kind of guessing here. That's what it feels like Disney's doing. It feels like they aren't going off of what the fans actually want. They're just putting together this homogenous thing that's going to appeal to kids, and it's not going to push any borders or boundaries. It's not going to further the series any meaningful way. It's not going to provide us with an interesting, enthralling, and really go get 'em story. It's just going to be just a time waster. Essentially, that's what it feels like. And the last of this sequel trilogy of the J.J. Abrams Disney Star Wars collaboration was an absolute dumpster fire. It was garbage. It was just horribly, horribly disappointing. And it did things with the Force, and throughout the sequel series, it did things with the Force that just didn't go with Star Wars lore in any way, shape, or form. You have Leia floating out into space and then creating a force field around herself when she hasn't shown any abilities of the Force prior. And then, she gets herself back into the ship and she's alive and all these things. It's just like, why? What is the purpose of this? Are you just trying to frustrate true Star Wars fans, which there's a countless swath of throughout the world? Or are you just actively trying to sabotage this film franchise and just tank it to the ground so you can introduce some other recreation of one of your original works through a live action film? It's very disappointing to see Disney selling out the franchise like this, which I really shouldn't be too surprised by, considering what they've done with their other titles. Again, the Lion King remake that they did, which, I guess it's kind of a cool concept doing live action films for classic animated films, but when the original animated product is far superior compared to the live action one, why are you doing it besides, novelty's sake and trying to make some money? The Lion King, the live action one was honestly, it was pretty crappy. They did a copy and paste of the animated one without some of the better animated sequences. And it was wildly disappointing because, one, the Scar in the animated film, the original animated film, Jeremy Irons, amazing, fantastic, great voice. The whole "be prepared," that number, awesome, it's great. They didn't do anything like that with Scar in this one. They didn't have any of those, whimsical musical numbers or just, music in general. It just wasn't. It wasn't the Lion King, and it's not the Lion King I grew up with. It's like, it wasn't the Lion King. It didn't have any of that pizzazz or sparkle that really makes you say, oh, I want to watch this. It was just live action, copy and paste with all the good stuff taken out. That's what it felt like. All the good voiceovers taken out. I love Beyonce. She's awesome, but I don't feel like she added anything. I don't feel like any of the voice actors in this film added anything. I feel like all of them took away. Especially Seth Rogen. Him being in the dynamic duo of Timon and Pumbaa. He just did not fit. Seth Rogen being in there just didn't feel like it worked. You had Nathan Lane and the other one. I don't remember the other actor between Timon and Pumbaa in the original animated film, but it just did not flow. And Disney keeps putting out these things that either aren't at all original, they're just copy and pasting their earlier works, or they're putting out things that are crappy, that don't pay attention to fans' interest in the series. And it's just, Disney is gutting out so many valuable franchises, and it's wildly disappointing. And just as a Star Wars fan, again, there's so much content out there that isn't just generated by those behind, the original three trilogies. There's entire comic series, there's entire TV shows, and all these other things before Disney, before all the merger talks and everything from the mid 2010s that came to fruition. It's before all of that. There were all these original things, these original stories for Star Wars that were so interesting, that were so dynamic and nuanced. And then you go to Disney with the opportunity to look at all of these as a reference point, and it does none of it. It creates their own thing that they want to sell to the masses, and it's a crappy product. It's a bad product. It's an unoriginal product, and it does things to characters that don't make any sense. And it's hilarious if you go on YouTube and you look up some of the film's own actors' reactions to the film, and it's just, they look like they're getting asked these questions of, what did you think on the film, after the last of this sequel trilogy films came out. And you can just see, like John Boyega, for instance, in some interviews with him, it just looks like he's kind of wincing when he's giving his descriptions, because he thought the direction of his character was stupid. He thought that the films were bad. I mean, you can just, obviously I'm reading between the lines, he didn't personally phone me and say, yeah, this is what I thought, but you can just look at someone in an interview and it just feels like they're being coached up pretty hard by the Disney PR team to say the right things in this situation, but they don't look like they're enjoying this back and forth conversation. I mean, look at Mark Hamill, the actor that plays Luke Skywalker, and they asked him, a plethora of questions about what he thought about these Star Wars films as the third of the sequel trilogy was about to be released, and he just kind of looked like he had a prepared statement for every question, but there was one instance where he kind of talked about his befuddlement when it came to the direction of where his character went and what happened, and how he gave his own personal idea of where he thought Luke Skywalker would go, based off of the prior films, and how he didn't really agree with the current trilogy's direction of the character and actions of the character. And then he was kind of just like, brushed off by J.J. Abrams. That's what he said on stage, and then he caught a little bit of flack for that, probably from Disney execs, because all the fans were like, "Whoa, is he giving us a hint here that he doesn't like the product?" And then he gave this statement on Twitter that sounded like it was written up by a skilled PR practitioner, saying that it was wrong of me to talk about some creative differences on such a large platform, and to take away from what I really truly think are great films. And it's just like, okay, that's a little bit too perfect of a cleanup response. That felt 100% like Disney was behind it. And you look at the products they put out there, and just hot, wet dumpster fire in a New York City summer. Just bad, really awful to look at, to see. The actions of the studio carry out that way on screen. It's just wildly disappointing. Just, you could have gone in so many different directions. They could have done so many different things. They could have gone from lore that's already created. They could have done so many things that further the series in a significant way, if not in a good and effective, technical cinema way. Do it like the early 2000s prequel series, where they were kind of crappy in their presentation, but hey, at least the story was interesting, at least the characters were interesting, and it progressed the series forward, and it left us fans wanting more, even though they were kind of mediocre products. This one aspires to be mediocre. This series aspires to have some sense of definition beyond cash grab, and I don't think you're going to find it. Watch these films top to bottom multiple times. You're not going to find any meaning behind them, besides Disney made this for money. They don't care about the product. All they care about is just, getting the money of its consumer. And the disappointing thing is about diluting their projects and creating things like The Mandalorian, which should be grittier, which should feel like there are greater stakes involved, instead of this PG, fun for the whole family kind of TV show about a bounty hunter. Okay, that's kind of crazy. I feel like, you've got an intergalactic bounty hunter, and all of a sudden he's a surrogate father. He's basically non-threatening for the entire series. I mean, the entire series, it kind of feels like there's a level of ineptitude to his character, and that he's not strong enough to handle things on his own, and he needs teamwork. The Mandalorian, if you look at like all the lore and the TV shows and the movies, Mandalorian people, they aren't like that, they can handle it on their own. And this show, it's soft, it's watered down, it's diluted, and it's just mind-boggling that they're basing this off of the Jango Fett and Boba Fett characters, and they're trying to, stamp on there that this is a character of the same ilk. It's not. I'm just going to tell you now, it's not. And sure, there's some cool visual effects. There's some cool fan services of some past Star Wars things we get to see. But yeah, again, this is a case of Disney feeling like they're doing a cash grab. This is another case of Disney feeling like they're putting a product out there, so we buy Disney Plus to watch this thing, and it's mediocre because they want something that can get the most opportunity for views, the most opportunity for reasons to get Disney Plus, because it's a family thing. But here's the thing. You look at films like Joker, okay? Rated R film, made over $1 billion. Made over $1 billion with a B. So clearly, there's a marketplace for a product that's a little bit grittier. People want a good story. The Joker being rated R and making over $1 billion proves that. It's an interesting story. It's a good story. And it's also not a fun for the whole family kind of story. But you go to Star Wars, and the Disney Star Wars in particular, which feel watered down, diluted, and very, family oriented. And they're not good. They're not making at all the same kind of profit margins Joker did, because Joker was made for $50 million and it made $1 billion. That's pretty big gain. There's just not enough that can be said to criticize Disney's usage of the Star Wars title. And that's not just me being an angry fan spouting out random things. It's just point of fact. You look at what they've produced, and it's just a homogenous group of films without direction that are trying to market themselves to the most amount of people because they don't offend anyone. And what you're getting is an unrealistic story, which, granted, yeah, it's in space. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on with Star Wars, but at least there's a more realistic human element to the other two trilogies. This one, no. It's just watered down family fare, and it's not good. You have to hope Disney will do better, but given their track record and who they've been selling the Star Wars franchise out to, in terms of video game publishers and other entities, don't count on it.